Let's talk about why my emergency fund is $30,000. Hey guys, it's Justine with Debt Free Millennials, the channel to help you crush your debt and live payment free. If you want to live with no more payments, no more student loans, no more car loans, no more credit card debt, you have to stick around the channel and click subscribe so you can catch another video from yours truly. Emergency funds. I feel like this is a super hot topic right now because all that is given and going on throughout this world in this year. And I think that a lot of us are concerned about how much we should have in our emergency fund. If you don't know how much you should have, definitely check out my video on that. I will drop a link to that in the description below. But let's get back to why I have $30,000 in a savings account for emergencies. I got this number by figuring out how much I should have saved up for 6 months of living expenses. Now, if you watched that other video on emergency funds, then you know that a fully funded emergency fund is at least 6 months of living expenses in cash set aside in a separate savings account. Now, you can save up to 9 months or a year's worth of living expenses. Do what feels most comfortable to you, but at minimum, a fully funded emergency fund is 6 months, and that's exactly what Kyle and I decided to do and put it in a separate savings account. Okay, so I ended up really getting my emergency fund built after I became debt-free in 2014 after paying off $35,000 in student loan debt in 2.5 years. I already had money set aside in a savings account as an emergency fund, and I definitely had more than $1,000 to start off with for my emergency fund as I was building it. I didn't stop at $1,000, I kept going. Then when Kyle and I moved from Kansas to California in 2015, we're like, holy it takes a lot of money to live here. And so we're like, our emergency fund needs to be adjusted so that we can ride out an emergency situation in San Diego. So here's exactly the steps that I took to determine how much I needed in my fully funded emergency fund. First, I figured out what are the bare bone expenses that absolutely needs to be covered if there was an emergency. It can be job loss, it can be something medically related, maybe it's like a huge car accident that you were involved with. Any of those things would then require you to pull from your emergency fund. And then I was thinking about this specifically for job loss. If I was just to, I don't know, all of my clients were like, we can't work with you anymore, or Kyle were to lose his job, how much would it take to actually cover our expenses while we get back on our feet? So take a look at this. This is how I kind of set this up in my Google spreadsheet. And what I put is what I need for my emergency fund and then what I pay per month. So this may require some digging in on your part if you don't know the average on certain categories that you spend. So for us, our rent is like god awful high. It's at $2,800 a month. So I know I need at least that much to cover. Plus our electricity, internet, cell phone plan, food, and then gas and car insurance. So that's why I said it's important that you go back and take a look at how much you're spending in some of these categories. If you don't know on average how much you're spending in food, go back the last 3 months, add that up, and then take an average across those 3 months, and then you'll kind of see how much you spend on things like food, because you still need to eat during an emergency. You're still going to be using your car if you're going on job interviews in such a case where the emergency is a job loss. Okay, so then what I did is I ended up adding up all of those things. These are my bare minimums. And so the total I need each month to live, survive, to breathe during an emergency is $36.65. So when I was going to determine the actual fully funded amount, I was going off of about $5,000 for the month, and I got $5,000 because that's what we typically spent just normal keeping our subscriptions, you know, still budgeting for a couple of different things and not really changing too much from the lifestyle. So 3665 was bare bones, 5K was padded. So I did $5,000 multiplied by 6 months. $30,000 is what we ended up with. And I transferred that into a high yield savings account. I personally use Ally. I've had absolutely no complaints with them. I've been using their bank for 2-3 years now. No complaints, everything's super easy. It links up to my primary bank and I can just transfer the funds over there for other savings. Okay, so I mentioned I kind of padded my emergency fund. So it is 6 months for sure, but I know I can stretch that out even a little bit more to 8 months, maybe even 9 months if I'm really diligent about what I'm spending money on during that time. The crazy thing about this though is we've had our emergency fund set up, I mean gosh, it's been since we moved out here, so 5 years almost, and we have never had to tap into it. Isn't it strange how when an emergency pops up and you don't have an emergency fund in place, you're like,
oh my God, where am I gonna get this money? What am I gonna do?
And then when you do actually have the emergency fund in place, it's like you never experience emergencies. It's very bizarre. One thing about Ally, and I'm not sponsored by Ally, I should be because I have been talking them up lately, but the cool thing about Ally is because it's high yield, that means I'm earning interest, more interest than the national bank average. At the time of this recording, I'm earning 1.25% on my savings account, which means I looked this up. In 2019 alone, I made more than $550 in interest just by parking my emergency fund money in a savings account with Ally. $558 just because I had my money with Ally. So if I were you and you are looking for a place to park your emergency fund money, somewhere where it's accessible, that you can get to it rather quickly, then I would take a look at high yield savings accounts. And I'd also take a look at, this is a homework assignment for everybody now, go inside your bank, wherever you have your savings account set up, and see how much interest you are earning on that money. The whole idea there is that you're not going to use it, so you might as well make it work for you. If you are earning anything less than 1% on your savings account for your emergency fund, it's time to move it. It's not personal, it's just business. I know a lot of people who have been with their bank since they were kids. I used to be the same way until I discovered that I wasn't making anything on interest with my savings accounts. I mean, it was peanuts. Even the credit union that I worked with, I was only earning 0.7% on a money market account. Doesn't make sense. Hop over if you are going to earn 1% or more. I think it's well worth it. So $30,000 sounds like a lot of money just to be sitting there with no use, but honestly, this is something that Kyle and I, this is the number that we feel safe and secure with. And knowing if there was anything that were either going to happen to us or, you know, God forbid, or something happens to the car, something happens with our jobs, then we know we have that money set aside to help us. And that peace of mind, you can't get that from anywhere else other than a fully funded emergency fund. So I'd love to know, what is your fully funded emergency fund number? Obviously, this is going to look different for everybody depending on how many months you are setting aside in that fund, and then what your normal monthly living expenses might look like, your bare bones living expenses. But I still think it would be interesting. So comment below if you are still interested in learning more about how to build up that emergency fund. Be sure to check out my other videos on how to do exactly that.